Beatrice thought she knew her Roth IRA. She had contributed to it for 11 years. She had converted a chunk of a traditional IRA into it 3 years ago. She had inherited a small Roth from her late husband last year. At 67, a retired dental hygienist from Raleigh, she was certain that any dollar she pulled out would be tax-free and penalty-free because the Roth rules are tax-free, always, forever, right? That is what her brother-in-law kept saying at family dinners. That is what the glossy brochure from her broker implied. She withdrew $28,000 to help her daughter with a down payment. 3 months later, she received a letter from her tax preparer saying she owed federal income tax on part of that withdrawal, plus a 10% additional tax on a different part, because she had pulled from the conversion layer within 5 years of that conversion. The total extra cost, between tax and penalty, was just over $4,600. Beatrice was stunned. She had done everything by the book, except she did not know there were 3 books, and each one had its own 5-year clock. Today, I am going to explain every clock, every layer, and exactly how to avoid the trap that cost Beatrice more than $4,000 of money she thought was completely hers. Before we go further, here is my standing disclosure. This video is for educational purposes only and is not personalized tax, financial, or legal advice. Consult a qualified professional for guidance on your specific situation. The Roth 5-year rules are among the most commonly misunderstood provisions in the entire tax code, and if you have a Roth account, you owe it to yourself to understand which clock applies to which dollar. The first thing to understand is that a Roth IRA is not one pool of money. It is 3 pools stacked on top of each other. The bottom pool is contributions. These are the dollars you put in with money you already paid tax on, up to the annual contribution limit, currently $7,000 a year if you are under 50 and $8,000 if you are 50 or older. The middle pool is conversions. These are dollars you moved into the Roth from a traditional IRA or a 401k, paying tax on the conversion amount in the year of the conversion. The top pool is earnings. These are the investment gains the money has generated while inside the Roth. The IRS orders withdrawals in a very specific way, called the ordering rules, found in publication 590B. When you pull money out, contributions come out first, then conversions in the order they occurred, then earnings. Every layer has different rules. Every layer has its own clock. Let me start with the contributions layer, because it is the simplest and the most retiree-friendly. Your direct contributions to a Roth IRA can come out at any time, at any age, for any reason, with no tax and no penalty. No 5-year wait, no age requirement. You put $10,000 of direct contributions into your Roth last year at age 60. You can take $10,000 out tomorrow, tax-free and penalty-free, and the IRS does not care. This is the one rule most people get right. It is also why Roth IRAs are sometimes described as the most flexible savings vehicle available to the middle class. The contribution layer is liquid at all times. Now we get into the clocks, and this is where people lose thousands of dollars. The first clock is the Roth IRA account 5-year clock. This clock measures whether your earnings come out tax-free. It starts on January 1st of the tax year. You made your very first contribution or conversion to any Roth IRA in your name. Not the day you made the contribution. January 1st of that tax year. So if you made your first Roth contribution in March of 2020, the clock started on January 1st, 2020, and the 5-year period ends on January 1st, 2025. Once this clock is satisfied, and you are at least 59 and a half, your earnings come out completely tax-free. That is called a qualified distribution. If you pull earnings before the clock is up, or before you are 59 and a half, the earnings are taxable and potentially subject to the 10% penalty. Note the word, and in that sentence. You need both the age and the 5-year clock for tax-free earnings. The second clock is the conversion 5-year clock, and this is the one that tripped Beatrice. Every single Roth conversion has its own 5-year clock. When you convert money from a traditional account to a Roth, you pay income tax on the conversion amount. The conversion amount itself, once in the Roth, is not taxable when withdrawn. But if you pull from that conversion amount within 5 years of the conversion and you are under 59.5, the 10% penalty applies to that portion. The reason is that the IRS does not want people using conversion as an end run around the early withdrawal penalty on traditional accounts. Here is the key detail most people miss. Once you are 59.5, the 5-year conversion clock no longer imposes a penalty, because the 10% penalty itself goes away at 59.5. So if you are over 59.5, the conversion 5-year rule is generally not a concern for conversions made after you turned 59.5, or for the penalty layer. But Beatrice was 67. How did she get hit? This is where it gets subtle. Beatrice had also inherited a Roth from her husband last year. Inherited Roth IRAs have their own rules, and in her case, the issue was not the penalty, but the tax treatment of earnings withdrawn from a Roth, where her clock from her husband's original contributions had not yet been satisfied. Spousal inheritances can allow the survivor to treat the Roth as their own and inherit the original owner's clock start date, but only if the survivor handles the paperwork correctly. She did not. She took a lump sum distribution from the inherited Roth before formally retitling it into her own name. That triggered different treatment under the inherited Roth rules, and because her late husband had only opened his Roth 3 years before he passed, the 5-year clock had not been satisfied. The earnings portion of her inherited Roth withdrawal became taxable. The conversion she had done 3 years ago, separately, also created its own 5-year window. I know that is a lot. Let me simplify it into dollars. Imagine you are 62. You opened your first Roth 7 years ago with direct contributions. Your account 5-year clock is satisfied. You are over 59.5. If you withdraw money from your direct contributions, it is tax-free and penalty-free. If you withdraw earnings from that original contribution pool, it is also tax-free because both requirements, age 59.5 and 5-year clock, are met. Now suppose you also did a Roth conversion 2 years ago. You moved $40,000 from a traditional IRA into your Roth and paid tax on it in that conversion year. If you pull that conversion amount out now, at 62, it is still tax-free because the conversion principal was already taxed. And because you are over 59.5, the 10% penalty does not apply regardless of the conversion's 5-year clock. In most cases, over 59.5, the conversion clock effectively becomes a non-issue. The exception is a very narrow scenario involving conversions and earnings together, which rarely affects retirees. Here is a different scenario. Suppose you are 57 and you converted $100,000 from a traditional IRA to a Roth 2 years ago. You are thinking about pulling $30,000 from the conversion amount next month because you are under 59.5 and it has been less than 5 years since the conversion. That $30,000 is subject to the 10% penalty on top of having already been taxed at conversion. $3,000 of penalty for pulling your own money. The fix is to wait. If you wait until 59.5, the penalty disappears because age alone resolves the conversion clock issue. Let me introduce Arthur. Arthur was a retired postal worker from Minnesota, age 63, with a Roth IRA he had opened 8 years earlier with direct contributions. He was planning a kitchen renovation and needed $32,000. His original contributions over the years totaled $38,000. He withdrew the $32,000 directly from the contributions layer. Because contributions come out first under the ordering rules, and because contributions are always tax-free and penalty-free at any age, his withdrawal was 100% tax-free and penalty-free. Zero tax, zero penalty. Compare that to his friend who pulled the same amount from a traditional IRA and paid about $7,600 in federal income tax at his bracket. Same need, different account. Roughly a $7,600 difference, simply because of the kind of account the money came from. Now here is a trap that catches a lot of retirees. The 5-year account clock is per person, not per account. Once you satisfy the 5-year clock with any Roth IRA, every new Roth IRA you open inherits that clock. If you opened your first Roth in 2015, and then in 2024 you opened a second Roth at a different custodian, The 2024 Roth is already past its 5-year clock because the personal clock was set by the original 2015 account. This is an enormous benefit for anyone who has had a Roth for years. But it does not apply to inherited Roths, which have their own separate rules, and it does not apply to Roth 401k clocks, which are measured separately from Roth IRA clocks. If you roll a Roth 401k into a Roth IRA, the Roth IRA's 5-year clock controls, which is why some retirees are advised to open a Roth IRA with a small contribution years before they plan to roll over a Roth 401k, just to start the clock. Nancy, a retired software developer from Minnesota, did exactly this. At 52, with no Roth IRA of her own, she contributed $100 to a new Roth IRA simply to start the 5-year clock. At 59, she rolled her $70,000 Roth 401k into that same Roth IRA. Because her Roth IRA clock was already 7 years old, every dollar she rolled over was immediately eligible for qualified distribution treatment. No waiting. If she had waited until 59 to open her first Roth IRA, she would have had to wait until 64 before her earnings could come out tax-free. That $100 contribution at 52 was one of the most valuable $100 she ever spent. I want to talk about the trap of partial conversions and poor record keeping. Every conversion has a taxable amount and a clock start date. If you do conversions in multiple years, you need to track each one. Your custodian sends you Form 5498, showing contributions and conversions each year, and Form 1099-R showing distributions. Keep every one of those forms forever. Not 7 years. Forever. The IRS does not track your Roth basis for you. You track it. When you eventually take withdrawals, you need to know which dollars are contributions, which are conversions, and when each conversion happened. Your tax preparer uses Form 8606 to report and track Roth basis and conversions. If you have not been filing Form 8606 when required, you may be creating a future audit risk. Talk to your tax professional. Let me walk you through the inherited Roth rules briefly, because they matter. If you inherit a Roth from your spouse, you generally have 3 options. You can treat the Roth as your own, which is usually the best option, because you take on the deceased spouse's clock. If it benefits you and inherit the account fully. You can remain a beneficiary, which keeps the account in the deceased's name, and requires you to follow inherited Roth rules. Or you can roll the Roth into an existing Roth of your own, which also usually allows you to benefit from the clock. If you inherit a Roth from anyone other than your spouse, the Secure Act generally requires you to drain the account within 10 years. That 10-year rule has evolved, and specific guidance has been issued in regulations. So work closely with your tax professional if you are a non-spouse inheritor. The 5-year clock for tax-free earnings transfers from the decedent, which means if the original owner had the Roth for more than 5 years, you inherit a clock that is already satisfied. Harold, a retired construction foreman from Arizona, inherited his mother's Roth IRA. His mother had opened the Roth in 2005. Harold inherited it in 2023. Because his mother's clock was nearly 2 decades old, every distribution Harold took from the inherited Roth was tax-free on the earnings. He still had to drain the account within 10 years under Secure Act rules, but he did not pay a cent of income tax on the earnings. His sister, however, inherited a separate small Roth their mother had funded just 2 years before passing. That Roth's clock was not satisfied. The earnings from that smaller Roth, when withdrawn, were taxable. Same mother, same planning intent, different clock status, different tax result. Let me give you a few action items. First, if you have any Roth IRA, find out today when your personal 5-year clock began. Look at your oldest Form 5498 or call your custodian and ask them for the first contribution year record. Write that year down and keep it where your family can find it because it matters for them too. Second, if you are planning a Roth conversion this year, understand that the conversion has its own 5-year clock and know whether the 10% penalty applies to your situation. If you are under 59.5 and plan to tap the converted dollar soon, the math may not work in your favor. Third, if you are inheriting a Roth or plan to leave one to heirs, talk to an estate attorney and a tax professional about how the 5-year clock will carry forward. The difference between an inherited Roth with a satisfied clock and one without can be tens of thousands of dollars over a 10-year distribution period. Fourth, file Form 8606, whenever your situation requires it. This form tracks basis, non-deductible contributions, and conversions. Without it, you or your heirs could end up paying tax on money that was already taxed. That is the worst kind of avoidable loss. Fifth, before you pull any money from a Roth, ask yourself 3 questions. Is this money coming from contributions, conversions, or earnings? How old is the clock that applies to that layer? Am I over 59 and a half? If you can answer those 3 questions cleanly, you can withdraw with complete confidence. If you cannot, pause and call your tax professional before you hit the withdrawal button. 10 minutes on the phone can save thousands of dollars. The Roth IRA is still one of the most powerful retirement tools the tax code offers. The contribution layer is liquid. The conversion layer can be strategically managed. The earnings layer, once the 5-year clock and age requirements are met, provides tax-free income for the rest of your life and potentially for your heirs. But every one of these benefits lives inside a rulebook, and the clock is the invisible hand that decides whether the benefit is yours. Know the clock. Know which dollar belongs to which layer. Make your decisions with the ordering rules in mind. Let me give you a few more practical considerations before we close. Qualified distribution rules beyond age 59 and a half. The Roth IRA rules define several specific circumstances under which earnings can be withdrawn tax-free, even before age 59 and a half, provided the 5-year account clock is satisfied. These include a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime limit, qualified higher education expenses, qualified disability, and distributions to a beneficiary after the account owner's death. Each of these has specific requirements. The first-time home purchase exception, for example, requires that neither you nor your spouse has owned a home in the 2 years prior. These narrow exceptions can be useful in specific circumstances, but most retirees planning for a long retirement will not need them. State tax treatment of Roth distributions. Most states that impose income tax treat qualified Roth distributions as federal defines them, meaning tax-free. A few states have specific quirks, particularly around Roth conversions that straddle state residency changes. If you are retiring and considering a move, or if you did a Roth conversion in a year when your state residency was in transition, work with a tax professional who understands both states. Roth conversions as income smoothing. Many retirees in their early 60s, after retiring, but before claiming Social Security and before RMDs begin, find themselves in unusually low tax brackets. These low bracket years are often the best opportunity for Roth conversions. Converting $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 a year from traditional to Roth during this window, paying tax at the lower rate, permanently reduces future RMDs and future tax exposure. The math can save tens of thousands over the course of a retirement. This is one of the most powerful planning windows most retirees do not fully use. A final note on record keeping. Every Roth contribution, every Roth conversion, and every Roth distribution generates paperwork. Your custodian provides Form 53498 for contributions and Form 1099-R for distributions. Your tax preparer uses Form 8606 to track basis and conversions. Keep every one of these documents, not just for yourself, but for your spouse, your heirs, and your executor. The Roth IRA is potentially one of the most valuable assets in an estate, and clean records preserve every benefit it was designed to provide. If you want more videos like this one, where we take one specific rule and pull it apart until you understand exactly how to use it, tell me in the comments which retirement rule has confused you the most. I read every comment, and the topics readers raise often become the next video. If you have a friend who has been contributing to a Roth for years without fully understanding the 5-year rules, send them this video. It takes 20 minutes of their time and might save them thousands. That is a trade worth making. I will see you in the next one.